Date with a Debut is a Words and Nerds and Breathe Art podcasts co-production recorded on a Wagnical country. And I pay my respects to all elders, past and present, and extend that to any First Nations people tuning in. Always was, always will be, Aboriginal land. On with the show.
I have read a lot of books, some of which are amazing, but about young women, it's like every time they drink, it's because there's a deep sadness inside them, or like every time they sleep with someone, a new trauma is formed. And like that is an authentic experience for some people, but it's not the way everyone is in their 20s.
Welcome to Date with a Debut, a podcast about debut authors, their incredible books, and their journey to publication. If you are looking for a new author to discover or writing inspiration for your own story and you don't know where to start, this is the place to be. I'm Nick Wasiliev, author of When Men Cry and your host for today's show, and I'm delighted to welcome another debut author in today's episode. If you enjoy the show, or indeed any other shows on the Words and Nerds platform, jump online and give us a thumbs up, a 5-star review, wherever you are listening. Thank you for listening to us and for supporting the Australian book industry. You can also find any books mentioned in today's podcast down in the description. In today's episode, I'm joined by Brydie Lee-Kennedy. She's an Australian screenwriter based in Sydney who has written for Netflix, Apple TV and Disney. But we're here to talk about her debut novel, Go Lightly, published by Bloomsbury, which is out now. We will discuss mild spoilers and we won't spoil the ending, so I recommend grabbing a copy of Go Lightly down in the description. I started off by asking Brydie about why, after a career in film writing, that now she turned her attention to literature, and the comparison of writing books compared to work for the screen.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm actually recording this from my parents' house on Gadigal country.
It's so lovely to have you. And normally I like to start all these podcasts, with you talking about your writing journey. But I mean, it's out there quite a bit that you've written quite a bit on TV, Netflix, Disney, etc. So out of curiosity, before we dive into Go Lightly, why was now the right time to write a book, and why this story on the page?
Oh, well, I actually started writing it in 2020, I had sort of a lull between TV contracts, and normally, I would use that time to like chase my TV agent for some development work. But actually, I just, obviously that was a time of everyone having a lot of time to think about what they wanted to do. And I actually already had a literary agent who I'd talked to about doing some essays, which she had told me was a bad idea because she was like, no one really wants to buy essays from someone they don't know. I think I just kind of thought like, oh, maybe I will try my hand at some fiction. But I actually didn't intend to write a novel initially. I thought like, I'll do kind of some fiction writing exercises for myself and see how I feel. And when I used to do like storytelling shows and stuff. And so I had missed the experience of writing prose as opposed to scripts. Mm. So I kind of started it out as a writing exercise. And then I got like 15,000 words in and I sent it to my agent and said, hey, I kind of think I might be writing a novel, but if you tell me that this is like not very good, please be honest and I won't finish it. Mm. And she was like, no, you should finish it. So it was kind of like, I'm not someone, I did a lot of like hustling early in my career to like constantly writing pilot scripts and like pitching for everything. And I had sort of burnt out on that. So I honestly think like if she'd been like, I don't think this is good, I probably wouldn't have returned to it for quite a while. Mm. But yeah, then I just kind of kept going. And I think part of what the writing exercise was about was I felt like I latched into the main character straight away. And I sort of wanted to do a character study in a way that is probably more challenging to do in a script, because unless you're going to go the lazy route and do lots of voiceover, it's like harder to delve into someone's interior life so completely. And I think part of what I thought with Ada was I was interested in delving into the interior life of someone who isn't actually particularly introspective. Ada doesn't spend a huge amount of time thinking about why she does the things she does. So I thought it would be interesting to get inside that kind of head and see if the reader could figure out why she's doing the things she does, even if she doesn't really know.
I'm so glad that your agent said, yes, keep writing, because just imagine this story might have never seen the light of day. Before we talk about Ada and this world, I'm actually also just curious, because it's not very often I get to speak with as many screenwriters as well as literary writers. How does writing books and literature compare to the experience of writing with television in mind? Because I'd imagine on one hand they'd come from the same kind of creative headspace, but on the other hand, the film space is probably a lot more, I don't want to say collaborative, because you have editors and designers and all of that with books, but you have to account for things like the actors, the director, how it actually is presented on the film stock, everything like that. How does it compare, out of curiosity?
The later stage of writing a book is collaborative. Once you get to the editing process, and I was lucky, my Bloomsbury editor was just so incredible, and it felt like a true collaboration. And I also got input from my American editor, who was amazing too, from HarperCollins. So I was really, really lucky that the editing stage felt like a true collaboration. But to get there, you've got to write 85,000 words by yourself. You are never... So one of the reasons I think I sent those 15,000 words, I think I sent a 15,000 words and an outline to my agent. And one of the reasons I did that is, if you are a screenwriter, if you're writing a pilot to pitch, or, to have a pilot in your back pocket as like a sample, you kind of do that by yourself. But if you're actually writing for a show, you would never get like 80,000 words into a project without like 50 other people seeing it. You have to pitch the episode idea. That's maybe a one-pager, and you'll get notes from 5 people. Then when you get that approved, you have to outline it and do a detailed outline. You get notes from the same 5 people and maybe another person. Then you write the first draft of the script, notes again. So it's such, and that's even after, often you will have been in a writer's room, so you will be working out the pitch with other people. So it definitely was more of a leap of faith to write a novel and to devote time to something that also, by the time, if I'm doing development work, it's a bit different, but by the time I'm writing an episode for a show, I know that show is going to happen. I know it's going to be out there. When I was writing the book, I was like, there is a really strong chance that no one except my agent and my partner will ever read this. And I've just kind of got to keep going and hoping that someone does. In terms of the practical differences, you get into a different kind of flow writing prose than scripts. And I think part of it is just the pure practice of you're using Final Draft, the industry standard for screenwriting around the world, and just the worst piece of technology ever. So you're using Final Draft, you're constantly, it's like, hit this, hit dialogue, hit this, hit action. The program itself is kind of clunky. So I found writing prose, I used to sometimes, to get myself into a scene when I was writing a script, I would write it out as prose first, and I would then go into it. And that was for my own process. So I think that was probably an indication that I was ready to be writing some more long form prose. So it's been quite a different process. It actually, even though it's both writing, it feels so different to me.
Give us your 1-minute pitch for what Go Lightly is about.
Okay. I'm notoriously bad at this. So if my publicist at Bloomsbury is listening, I promise I've been practicing. So Go Lightly is the story of Ada. She's a 26-year-old Australian living in London. She's sort of working as a cabaret performer, but mostly she's working as a temp or spending money she doesn't have. And she's kind of a party girl. She loves a good time. She doesn't spend a lot of time thinking about the future or her past. And she meets 2 people kind of at the same time. One is another Australian called Sadie, and one is an English guy called Stuart. And she basically is interested in both, so decides to pursue a relationship with both, or not even relationships, just to pursue a romantic path with both. And then it becomes inevitably more complicated when they find out about each other. And also, I guess the other part of the book is that her sister in Florida, who's living in Florida, is having a baby, and so she has to go to see her family. So the book's sort of about how we behave and perform in different ways according to which people we're with. And I guess for Ada, she's different depending on if she's with Stuart or Sadie. She's also different when she's with her housemate and best friend, Mel. She's very different when she's with her family. She kind of regresses in the way that people do, I think, when they go back to their family. Yeah, so it's kind of just about different kinds of performance. And I think I also wanted to write a book about like a young woman who doesn't always make what we would consider to be like good or sensible decisions, and she's not punished for it. Like she enjoys being young, you know, sleeping with people, partying, and she doesn't feel kind of in a conflict about it. And I think that's because I have read a lot of books, some of which are amazing, but about young women who kind of, it's like every time they drink, it's because there's a deep sadness inside them, or like every time they sleep with someone, a new trauma is formed. And like that is an authentic experience for some people, but it's not the way everyone is in their 20s.
No, that's right.
So I kind of wanted to just like let Ada have fun.
Nailed it. You were good.
Okay.
Totally. It was really good. It was fine. I love the description. Even before I started diving into it, I love that it was kind of, people have compared it to like, you know, Sally Rooney, Dolly Alderton. But reading this book, I bet the best way I could kind of describe it was an Australian travelling version of something like The Graduate or Holly Golightly from Breakfast at Tiffany's, from Truman Capote's Breakfast at Tiffany's. Ada lives the life of excess in London because she enjoys going out. She enjoys being present with people and living in the moment. But as you say, she wants to become, she wants to get into, start an acting career, and but she's making ends meet as first a temp and also a cabaret dancer. There's the living in, I love what you've captured here with the living in your 20s lifestyle of just letting go and having fun. I don't know what it is though. Maybe it's the fact that I've kind of read similar books to you, but I got a sense that there was like a subtext of being so focused on today that you're not thinking about tomorrow. A little bit, and maybe putting up those fronts that you kind of talk about a lot in such a way that you actually are putting aside tomorrow or your growth into the person that you want to be or could be. Needless to say, I found there was a lot to unpack under the surface here with this book, even though, ironically, Ada is someone who is very much about being present and being in the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Holly Golightly one obviously is partly where the title comes from.
Yes.
So there's a bunch of characters throughout contemporary fiction, or even, slightly further in the past. Like Holly Golightly is one of them. Sally Bowles is another. I think it's interesting to note that both of them are these incredible women, and they're written by queer men, which I think is a very specific relationship between the idea of the feminine and queerness. And that's probably the wanky background of the book as well. Like, I love Breakfast at Tiffany's, love Truman Capote, but I also, Christopher Isherwood has always been a writer who I adore, and his kind of creation of Sally Bowles, I find very interesting because he both loves her. He also sort of patronizes her in that, like, she's, he wants to, both he as a writer and his Avatar in the book, want to protect and look after her, and she kind of is resistant to it. And so is Holly. Holly's resistant to being looked after differently in the book than in the movie. But I think back even further, like women have written about party girls as sort of damaged, going way back. Like I think about Pride and Prejudice and how like my most controversial literary opinion is that Lydia Bennet is my favorite of the Bennet sisters, because the rest of them are, and it's, you know, it's a product of the time, obviously. But like, if you were to look at those people today and you were like, oh God, like, do you want to be the earnest older sister, or do you want to be this or do you want to be that, or do you want to be the one who's like, I'm a teenager, why are you trying to marry me off to some boring old guy? Like, so I think there's this kind of idea throughout literature of like, the like girls just want to have fun idea. And that is Ada. And I think she kind of, I think I also wanted to write the Sally Bowles and Holly Golightly stuff and everything. I wanted to write her as a queer woman rather than as a woman being written by a queer man, and just seeing kind of the differences there, the differences in how she treats herself.
Talk me through Ada a little bit. I mean, like, you know, free-spirited individual, which I also sometimes look at free-spirited individuals and maybe that it feels like it's implied that there's something else going on there for that free spirit. 26-year-old Australian living in London, and a lot of Aussies can relate to this because, you know, we have a lot of that culture of going out and exploring and going and traveling the world for a little while. It's kind of that thing. And I love, going back to a point you mentioned earlier about the fronts that she puts up in front of different people. She feels like different characters in some points because of the many different lives she leads when she's in front of particular people or in a particular setting or context. You know, there's the cabaret dancer, Ada. There is the temp, Ada. There is Ada trying to start this career. And she kind of does feel like she's in this moment, always trying to be in the moment wherever the situation is. And I don't necessarily think it's like initially, because I didn't think it was, I kind of was like, maybe you know, I'm going to try and go with the book because, you know, I don't want to feel like it's the damage underneath. I don't want to go down that route. Because you could easily say, well, she's running from responsibilities, or, you know, she's refusing to grow up, or she's doing this, this, and this. And that's where I kind of fell into it a little bit more, particularly where she meets Sadie at the Edinburgh Fringe. And then, of course, meets this man from Liverpool, Stuart. So this love triangle, I think, really sets up this dynamic that is the catalyst for her, and this kind of, I don't want to say it's a rut because it's like she's in this adventure, she's doing all of these crazy things, but it upsets the status quo, this love triangle. Tell me about these three characters and this crazy love triangle.
Yeah, so I think for Ada, she doesn't view being different with different people as being inauthentic, I think she views that I think in her mind, she's always being her authentic self. It's just that she always wants to have a good time, and she wants other people to have a good time as well. Like, she is self-absorbed. She's got, you know, big main character syndrome, but I think she's also, you know, generous with the people around her, and she wants everyone to be happy, or like to be, you know, to her mind, if everyone's having a good time, it was worth doing. And I think the way that comes into conflict is basically when she is pursuing these two relationships, the two of them do find out about each other, and they feel very differently about the situation. There could have been a way in which I had her have really responsible conversations about ethical non-monogamy and like making sure everyone, you know, trusts everyone else, and like, you know, being bisexual and like queerness and how that butts up against traditional ideas of monogamy. And she could have done all that. But she's like 26 and she's having a good time. Like, I think
you're not thinking about that. You're just thinking about what's in front of you.
Yeah. And I think there is, you know, a sense now, like in sexual relationships or romantic relationships, you do have a responsibility to other people. But I do think that we can overstate, like, she's honest when the issue comes up, and she doesn't try and force either of them to feel a particular way about it. But yeah, like she doesn't behave the best. She isn't always upfront, because I think she would probably be a less interesting character if she always behaved in ways we found responsible, or like, you know, like she swallowed a copy of The Ethical Slut and was like sprouting and, you know, statistics to people and just talking about heteronormativity and all this good stuff. Like she's not. She's kind of having fun, and sometimes that manifests in ways that are like not responsible. Sadie is older than her. So one kind of important feature of the triangle, I think, is that Sadie is older and Stuart is younger. And so the ways they view Ada and the amount of control she's able to have over those relationships, like I think people think it varies because Sadie and Stuart are different genders. That's obviously, you know, that will make things different. But it's also about Sadie is older. Sadie is also Australian. They have that kind of default cultural knowledge with each other that she doesn't share with Stuart necessarily. And Sadie does have this kind of cool quality to her, whereas Stuart is a much more obviously needy character, and much more obviously emotional in a lot of ways. So yeah, I think what part of the reason that she performs differently with each of them is she sees them each as wanting and needing different things from her, and she's happy to provide those things. They just don't cross over between the two of them necessarily.
Yeah, and it definitely creates a very interesting dynamic when they find out about each other, which will keep spoiler free and say to the listener, go read it. But I do also want to ask about some other particular characters in this story, and that is specifically Mel, but also Gabby, her sister, and because in a similar way, Ada kind of the way she reacts around those two. I also find very interesting about, you know, where she sits, not just about where she views her past, particularly with Gabby, but also kind of that present situation with Mel. Their stories, I found myself very interested in them, particularly, you know, when we go to Florida and all of that particular environment as well.
Yeah, so Mel is her flatmate and best friend. They're very close. And I think that was a product of, writing Mel that way was a product of like, you know, I was in share situations for a really long time. And I do think that millennials are in share houses for longer than earlier generations. And it means that there is a new degree of intimacy that is formed. It's someone who's not just a friend, they're not a partner, but you might live with them almost as intimately as you live with a partner. You might not. There's loads of share house situations where you barely interact, but that's probably not the kind of person Ada is. She was always going to end up forming an intimate connection with a flatmate, and she has with Mel. Mel, it's interesting. Mel holds a lot of herself back in ways that Ada doesn't. And it means that, you know, when they have minor or major conflicts, it's not really either of their faults or it's both of their faults, because they just have fundamentally different ways of experiencing the world, but they love each other. And I guess the idea is you and your friends don't have to be similar to support each other. And so with Gabby, the sister, they have never been close. I don't have sisters. I have two brothers, and I've always been so interested in sister relationships. It's probably really boring and like gender essentialist to be like, sisters are so interesting to me. But like, I think growing up, I would see the way sisters, you know, I went to an all-girls school, and I would see like sisters at the school, and they would like have these really fascinating relationships that had a quality to them, but I think my relationships with my brothers didn't have, and I think there was something gendered about it. So I've always been interested in that. And I think one thing is that from the outside, other people might think that Ada and Gabby are kind of similar. You know, they do look similar, and you see in moments where they're comfortable with each other that they share a sense of humor, and there's like all these kinds of things. But Ada, who tries to live in the moment, resents being dragged into the past by Gabby, I think. And seeing Gabby brings up a lot of feelings from her past. And I think that is really where their conflict lies. It's not in anything that either of them are doing now. It's in this kind of anchoring to a past that neither of them have quite moved on from with each other. Yeah, so I find Gabby and her, Gabby becomes a mother, and that shifts the dynamics as well. And I think that brings up a lot of stuff with Ada about like what her future is supposed to be, which again is stuff she doesn't like thinking about. So yeah, I think Gabby, it's nothing to do really with how Gabby even is. And I think that can be the way with family or people you've known forever. You find it hard to move on from the ideas that you've held about them for a really long time, even if it doesn't line up exactly with who they are now.
Absolutely. I think maybe the reason why I like these two characters specifically is because the fact that they are in such a different place compared to Ada, and yet she interacts with them and has those relationships and a different kind of love with them, even if it is incredibly complicated. With Gabby, it's more connected to that past, to what has come before. And of course, Mel, I find it's, I was not surprised. I kind of did find myself being quite drawn to Mel because it's so, whenever, you have those housemate situations, often I have found in nearly the vast majority of all houses that I've stayed in, I might be completely different to the other person. And there's actually a complementary nature there where you come to an understanding that you look at the world and view the world in different ways. And there is the place where the love and connection is and the understanding is. And I think that's kind of the one thing I can really say, if we can summarize this book, is that it is a story about the complexities of relationships, but also how they change and how they change you. But, I do see the love and the joy that the life Ada has brings, because it is so focused on happiness and acquiring happiness and being present. But no spoilers, of course, about the ending, but I do think Ada ends in a very interesting place within this book. And I kind of also want to know, what did that ending about her teach you about the crazy, messy world of your 20s and that environment where she was in? What did it teach you?
Yeah, so again, without kind of giving spoilers, I think Ada ends, so the ending of the book is I have noticed, is very open to interpretation. A number of people who've read it have given me wildly conflicting views on the end of the book, which I find really, really interesting. And I think it's because this is sort of a book about someone embracing possibilities. And I guess I want her to have possibilities. I want to see into the future that Ada does have possibilities. And I think there is sort of a romantic idea for me as well, in that she's always going to be 26. Like, I'm not writing, this isn't like the beginning of a trilogy. Like, Ada is always going to be 26. And I like the idea of not locking her down particularly, because she's destined to not age, and I didn't want to force her to, I guess. There was going to be no flash forward 10 years, she's doing this, because I'm sort of not interested in that, to be honest. I'm interested in who she is in the moment, in the way that she is interested in being in the moment.
I want to ask you about a little bit about your journey to publication, because obviously you've kind of already touched on it a little bit with, with your agent, how Bloomsbury picked up the book. And I want to know, how was the experience for you of crafting it together with the editor and with the team at Bloomsbury, as well as HarperCollins?
Yeah, so I was in the UK when we sold the book. I'd been living there for 10 years. I'm actually back in Sydney now for indeterminate time, but for a while. So I got really lucky, basically. We had the book went to auction, which again, I thought was something that was like, you all sit in a room and it's like bang, bang with the gavel and the highest bidder or whatever. Like the auction actually took like 2 weeks. So it's like a much slower process than I thought. And that is why agents are good, because at every turn I was just like, say yes. And my agent was like, no. She kept me under control. So it got to the final stage where I met with the 3 publishers left in the auction, and I got to choose Bloomsbury. And I think that was really lucky it's really lucky. There's no getting around it. It's really lucky. And to be honest, I would say, sadly, 90% to do with my agent is like genuinely incredible. She orchestrated the whole thing. Anyway, but yeah, I got to choose Bloomsbury, and part of it was that Emma, who was my editor there, from the first pitch that she made for the book all the way through the process, it was like what she saw in the book was what I had always hoped someone would see in it. She didn't come to me and just be like, ooh, it's like a fun romance, or it's this or it's that, because I love reading fun romance books, and I'm aware that this is not one. And so I think I was always a bit worried that people would be like, would pick up on that stuff rather than on, I think it's kind of a character study more than it's anything else. So yeah, Emma just really understood the book. And then when we had the auction in America, it went to HarperCollins, and I was lucky there that my editor who bought it there had worked with my editor at Bloomsbury on another book, I think on Dolly Alderton's book maybe. Anyway, it was on someone else's book, so they knew each other. So I did one big round of edits of Bloomsbury, and then as a courtesy, they brought in my Harper editor for the second round. So then I had 2 editors, both of whom I respected like to the ends of the earth. So it was kind of a dream process. Every note they made was so thoughtful, and my agent had actually already noted my first draft, and I had rewritten it before we sent the book out. So I was just, at every stage, there was just like really smart people making really good points. And it's kind of the dream. I couldn't have asked for better collaborators at the editorial stage. And then after that, we had like the copy edits and the proofreading. And what the copy edits taught me is that I have never once punctuated dialogue correctly in my whole life. There was like this, it came through and it was like 1,000 copy edits, and I was like, oh my God. And then every time it was that I hadn't put like the comma outside the quotation marks or inside. I still can't remember which one I'm supposed to have done, but I did it wrong. I did it wrong every time. And so I just had to go through and approve like 1,000 copy edits. But that's, these people are incredible. Like to have that attention to detail is like, again, I just felt so lucky. Also, I hadn't known that it causes problems for them if you quote lyrics. And I had loads of quoted lyrics in the book. And then the managing editor had to come to me and go, let's talk about the ways in which these are useful, like important to you and not important to you, because I'm going to have to go and figure some stuff out if they're important. And I just had no idea that was going to be a copyright issue. So it's been a real learning curve, but I've just been lucky that everyone involved has been really thoughtful. And my editor, Bloomsbury, is on maternity leave now, and her cover is also incredible. And like one thing that I think they are very like aware of is that debut novelists often don't know the process, and that can be quite stressful. And basically they're making sure at every stage that I know, like, this is happening this week, this is what's happening next. And I just feel really lucky about that, because I really had no idea about the process. So it's been amazing. I'm honestly the luckiest person in the world.
On that, what is next? Will you write again? Will we see another book? Obviously, we're done with Ada.
Yes.
It feels like this is her story. Will we see another book?
Yeah, I'm working on a second book. I still have I'm still also screenwriting. So I didn't start the second book for a while, but I had it very... Again, I sort of had the character and I knew what I wanted from her. It's funny, she's very different to Ada, and I think I had to really finish Go Lightly like copy edits done, cover done, everything before I could dive into a new person. But it does mean the book is coming out in like 2 weeks, and I have to reread it because I've had to put it out of my mind in order to write the new one. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I think it's incredible people who manage to write these like 10 book series and they like keep track of everything that was happening in the previous book. And I mean, they must have those like huge murder boards with the red string, because like I would not be able to hold all that in my mind. So as far as I'm concerned, like Ada's world is complete in Go Lightly, and now I'm in this other world. Yeah, but I'm enjoying writing a second book. I think I thought that after I did the first book, I would be like, what a breeze. I'm a genius novelist and I never have to have self-doubt again. And actually, as soon as I started writing the second book, I was like, do I know how to write a book?
Yeah, that's literally it. It feels even worse because you're like, was it a fluke? It was a fluke, wasn't it? That time it was.
Yeah, and also I'm being like, then you start second guessing like the ways, well, what if the things that people liked about those things aren't present in this new book, so maybe no one will, and then it's like you've just got to get that all out of your brain. Otherwise you'd never write again if you were listening to those voices. So,
preach. Yeah. I mean, I'm in the same situation right now with my second book, so I know it completely. We'll finish off with the last part of the show, which is our rapid fire question part of the date. So I'm going to hit you with a bunch of questions, and then you come up with the first answer that comes to your head. Have allowed you to prep for the first two.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, all about books. We like to talk prep and talk about preps about books. So, what is your favorite book that you have read in the last 12 months?
So it actually is a book of essays. It's called A Real Piece of Work, and it's by Erin Riley, and they're an Australian writer. And they are so part of the book is about like their gender journey, which I sort of knew from the marketing that it was going to be about. But actually they work as a social worker, or did, in the aged care sector. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the book is about the experience of that kind of social work. My brother's a social worker, but he's a youth worker, and it's like different sets of requirements. And I really didn't know a lot. I mean, it's pretty devastating account of our failed social safety net. But the writing is so exquisite, and the way that they blend personal experience with academia, I found like incredible. And then I actually met Erin and really embarrassed myself talking about how much I love the book. We met we were at a bar, and I had 2 margaritas and was just like, here's all the reasons I think you're a genius. And they were very nice about it. So
bless. That's so sweet. Yeah, I think we've all got one of those stories where we meet someone and are completely starstruck by them. It's
very embarrassing.
Guilty. What is your favorite debut that you've ever read?
It's White Teeth by Zadie Smith. I had actually read 2 other Zadie Smith books before I read White Teeth. And I honestly think part of it, and this is so ridiculous, is I was like, it was such a huge cultural thing that I think I thought I knew what it was. Do you know what I mean? When you're a bit like, I kind of know what that's about. And then I liked her other books, and I went back and read it, and I was like, oh, this book is perfect. And it's unreal. I think she wrote it when she was like 21. And it's like genuinely, I'm like, how, for starters, I don't think I sat still for an hour at a time when I was 21. Like, how did she write this epic? I'm pretty sure she was still at university when she wrote it. Anyway, I think it's really incredible. It's sort of her other books, I think, which I love. I think I've now read 3 of her other books, but they're much more grounded in reality. White Teeth has these elements of like magical realism. It crosses like 100 years in time, but focusing on these families. and like intergenerational kind of reactions to kind of migrant stories. But it's also, this is what I didn't know about it. It's really funny. Like, I did not know it's a funny book. I thought it was like a searing family drama. And I was like, okay, well, when I feel like reading a searing family drama, I'll pick it up. And actually it's hilarious. So infuriating that it was written by a 21-year-old.
Yeah, that just makes me just go, oh, screw you. Screw you for being, oh, man.
She's just a genius. I guess that's it. She's just a genius.
Just get out of here. Get out of here. Come on. You yourself used to be a cabaret performer.
Mm-hmm.
What is your favourite memory of being a cabaret performer?
Oh. Okay. I was in a cabaret double act called Sugar and Vice. And we had a show that toured. It was sort of our bread and butter for a couple of years. That was called To All the Men We've Never Slept With. And we had a show at the Edinburgh Fringe. We were both doing earlier shows, and then we were like, oh, let's do a Sugar and Vice show for the month. And we got booked an 11 p.m. slot for the full month at the Fringe. And we're in a place called the Voodoo Rooms, which was like incredible cabaret venue. But what we used to do in the middle of the show is we would ask people in the audience who wanted to put up their hands and talk about someone that they'd never slept with and had always regretted it. And one night, this guy was like, oh, there was a guy that I went to university with and I didn't know he was also gay because he didn't come out till later, but I had a crush on him all the way through university. And we were like, my God, you should call him. And the guy was like, okay. And so we stopped the whole gig so that this guy could call someone from university, and everyone was silent. And he's like, I think they were from Bristol. And he was like, next time you're in town, maybe we can get a drink. And the guy on the other end was like, okay, I'll see you then, I guess. And we were like, we've done it. These people are going to fall. And I was like, you've got to get back in touch with us if you guys get together. We never heard from him again. But there was like a room of 100 people all being like, we've witnessed a great love story. And like, who knows? Probably nothing came of it.
Well, at least they, like the very least, I hope they slept together and finally got that ticked off the list. Let's hope that they
and then they were like, wow, this was a lot of drama and maybe not worth it, but okay.
Love it. Do you have a favorite word?
Oh, I think for versatility, I really like the word wild.
Nice.
I find myself often being like, oh my God, that's wild. Or I'm like, that is wildly good. And I think I overuse it, but I think it's because I find it a very versatile word.
Yeah, nice. I feel like I don't want to label, but I got the sense that you really love yourself. A good love triangle.
I thought you were going to stop after you really love yourself. I was like, is this therapy?
Yeah, no. So this has taken a turn. Hey, we started at a cabaret show and here we are. No, I think I can tell that you do love yourself a good love triangle. Mm-hmm. What is your favourite trope outside of the love triangle?
Ooh, okay. Well, I just read a really good book, which I got in advance of, that's coming out this year, called Experienced by Kate Young, which is a lesbian rom-com. And I don't want to like put too many spoilers, but I will say it starts out as like a more classic, like friends to lovers. And then in the middle, it becomes fake dating. And that is my favorite. I love a fake dating rom-com. I could never write one. I don't think I have the skills to inject something fresh into that genre, but so many people do. And I love the fake dating. I love it's like a celebrity has to pretend they're dating this person and they fall in love. And I think it's a really fun romance trope.
Nice. I like it. What is one lesson that you wish you could go back and tell yourself from like in your early 20s? Like if there was one thing that you've learned right now that you go back and tell yourself, what would it be?
Oh, I don't really have any like personal, like in terms of like emotional content. I do think I probably should have told myself to either start a pension or keep contributing to my super, because I was freelance and I didn't do anything sensible with any of the money I earned. I was in the UK for 10 years, and towards the end, a lot of people started asking me if I had a pension, and I was like, none of us have pensions. Everyone did. Yeah, except me. So probably I would tell my like 21-year-old self to look up what a pension is.
Yeah. Nice. Smart idea. Last question, and I hate to bring it back to the Fringe, but I personally just love the Fringe. If anyone hasn't gone to Edinburgh and gone to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, go to it because it is so much fun. Even though I was kind of, the basis for this question was I remember going to a show at like 11 a.m. Called Crazy Horse, I think it was the name of it at the Fringe, and it was single-handedly, and it remains to this day, the worst show I have ever seen. It was terrible from start to finish. So on that, and this is more of a question of watching experience, what is your favourite memory from the Edinburgh Fringe?
Oh, wow. Someone who I was friends with used to do this thing once a Fringe, basically. I don't think I should say who it is because I'm pretty sure he kept it anonymous, but he's a very successful comedian, but I think maybe the conceit is still that people don't know. He used to do a thing that was called A Man in a Gorilla Mask Sits on Stage for an Hour, then Leaves. And that was basically the show. And so what happens is, and he and I, we were friends. We did Melbourne together, we did Adelaide Fringe, we did Edinburgh. So we often saw each other like at these different festivals. And he would just come out on stage in a gorilla mask and sit there for an hour. And what was always amazing was the show just becomes how the audience reacts to it. Yeah. There are people who know what they're getting in for, and often the show would start at midnight or something. And there'll be people who know what they're getting in for, and we'd like bring in, you'd bring in booze, you'd bring balloons and like throw them on stage, you'd like do all this stuff. But there were all these people who would come along, and he used to sell the show as like, it's a super secret Fringe event. It's really exclusive. And so all these people who didn't know would be like, oh my God, I'm going to a really exclusive Fringe event. And then they would be sitting there at 1 a.m. being like, that man is still sitting on stage in a gorilla mask. Anyway, I know how it sounds, but it was a really incredible, like every year it was like a fun community event. And I loved it every time.
That sounds amazing. Oh, I would pay money to go to that. I would pay money because the crowd reaction would be everything. I would just...
I think he periodically still does it. So if you ever see that advertised, go.
Whoever you are, I don't know who you are, this person. I mean, you do, but I don't. Whoever you are, bring it back. I will pay money to watch you sit on a stage for an hour in a gorilla mask and then get up and leave.
It's a perfect show.
Thank you so much, Brydie. This has been so much fun. And to everyone listening, go and grab yourself a copy of Go Lightly.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Date with a Debut and for listening to the Words and Nerds channel. You can buy all books mentioned in today's episode down in the description box, and if you enjoyed the show or indeed any episode of Words and Nerds, drop us a review, leave us 5 stars or a thumbs up. It is hugely appreciated. Catch you soon.